Greetings from Antigua, or as the locals often refer to it, the South Bend of the West Indies and Leeward Islands. I am Tim O'Malley, joined today by friends and colleagues Tim Priester and Drew Mantock of Irish Illustrated. This is our March 9th edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. Guys, we are about 11 days away from the start of spring practice and 9 from the opening press conference with head coach Marcus Freeman, and probably most importantly, head football athletic trainer Rob Hunt and strength and conditioning coordinator Lauren Lando. I believe that's the first time, Tim, we're getting Lauren Lando since our initial time speaking with Lando when he was hired. We'll get to spring thoughts and expectations later in this segment. But first, Tim, you were not on our Thursday podcast with Drew and Pete Sampson, where we had our recollections of Lou Holtz. You've written plenty at Irish Illustrated Insider about it, but I think the spoken word has not happened, so I wanted to kind of turn it over to you. Thoughts, recollections on Lou Holtz, and first maybe the football coach and then the human being. Or vice versa, if you prefer.
Let's start with the football coach. And I obviously wrote about it over the weekend, and it took me a while to really find my voice on it because I wanted to get a full grasp of how I wanted that message to come forth. And I'm very happy with my second version compared to my first. It just gave me an opportunity to talk about my relationship with him. And again, I don't pretend to have been his friend. There were a million other people way more important to him than me, but he did make time for me, and that was what I tried to express, is that this was a guy that he made it easy for all of us on the beat, and it was a small beat back then, but I mean, he won a national title, he won for a long period of years, he was quotable, he was funny. Damn, all we had to do was just turn the recorder on and let him take over, and he was a great football coach, there's no doubt about it. But, what epitomized his football teams at Notre Dame? They were physical, they were tough, they were decisive because he was decisive in his coaching, and therefore they had a sense of urgency, and nobody had a greater sense of urgency than Lou Holtz did. And motivated, tough-minded, and it all rubbed off on his players, and it was reflected by a 64-9-1 record from 1988 through 1993, and it was, I've been doing this for 44 years, so if Lou Holtz doesn't come along or he doesn't win a national title, there's not much for me to hang my hat on for doing this all these years, other than, I guess my love for Notre Dame and doing what I always wanted to do. But he was all those things. He was also a handful. In the editorial that I wrote over the weekend that Irish Illustrated subscribers got, I wrote about my perspective with him, which was really good. I mean, we had very few explosions along the way, but he was unreasonable, man. He was unreasonable with his players. He was unreasonable with his coaches, and he was an athletic department tornado many times as the head coach of Notre Dame. And he had, like at Arkansas, he had worn out his welcome. Maybe that's a little too harsh, but. It was just he was a tough guy to get along with. He was demanding. He was demanding of everybody that he came in contact with. So, there are a couple notes that I've taken, Tim. I don't know if you want to just converse about this a little bit. Well, I think that here I am making a long speech again here, but some of the things we had a long conversation in 2023. And some of the topics that we talked about, his career is over, now he's a little bit more honest about some of the things that he wasn't willing to be quite as forthright about when I was working with him. But he did say 3 years ago that, I quote, "I don't think I'd be able to tolerate it," meaning today's football. You couldn't coach like he coached.
No.
Now. You couldn't run the style of offense that he ran then, where it was just line up and physically beat people. Vinny Serrato was his recruiting coordinator, and they gathered a ton of talent, and they beat the stuffing out of most people. And you just couldn't line up and do that today. You need to be a little bit more diverse. And I said that he had this tendency on Thursdays of game week, where, especially when they were in the midst of particularly when they were in the midst of their winning. On Thursday, he would essentially tell myself and the South Bend Tribune what was going to happen on Saturday. And so part of my interview a couple of years ago was, how did you know that? And his quote was, "By Saturday, we had created a mindset that there was no way we could lose if we did things the right way. We controlled our own destiny." And he was right. And that's the way most of his teams played through the 1993 season, 94, 95, 96. He's admitted that he took his foot off the gas pedal a little bit. He had also lost Serrato after the 91 season, I want to say. So, by the time that great class or the great season of 1993 transpired, 94, 95, 96, he just wasn't putting the same athletes out on the field. And we do have a question in the second segment about losses that he hated the most. Well, yeah, and the losses that
I was going to bring that right here, actually.
Okay, we can talk. Yeah,
Questions right here is Irish Gambler wonders, besides the obvious, 93 BC and Miami 89, which ND loss or tie do you think Lou Holtz despised the most? Irish Gambler would like to add, I may or may not have greased a palm at the gate to get my 12-year-old self and buddy into the stadium for the second half of Rick Myers. I believe this is Snowball when he said last second pass. I thought, Stanford. I thought they're going to pull that one out of fire. Tim, I have my answer for this one from talking to Lou Holtz. But if you have your answer for this one, I want to see if
No, I bet I wrote down 3, but I bet it's one of the 3.
1991 at Penn State when he left his home and told his wife, Beth, we are going to get killed today. I think he regrets the entire week of practice. They were a top 10 team. The week before, they were up 31-7 at the half over Tennessee on Senior Day, lost 34-31 on a field goal attempt that went off a butt, and that's never a good field goal attempt. Sounds a lot like 2025 season, actually. And he was certain they were going to lose to Tony Sacca, the original Tony Sacca, and Penn State, and they got worked over in State College.
Those are 2 of the 3 that I wrote down. The other one would be the 92 loss to Stanford when they took a 16-0 lead and never scored again, and lost 33-16. But I think the Tennessee one that you referenced, they were up 21-0 first quarter, 31-7 in the second quarter. Notre Dame's kicker was injured.
It was Rob Leonard that had to come in. Well, Hendrick got injured at the half.
Right.
He had a field goal blocked, and he got injured making the tackle, and that knocked the second half.
And Rob Leonard had to kick in the second half, and that kick did not clear the line of scrimmage. No, but yeah, those would be the ones. Those would be the 3 that I would mention, and essentially because Notre Dame was leading, and then they couldn't do anything after that, and that would destroy him emotionally because he was so accustomed to just physically taking over football games.
I remember Tony Brooks, who I loved back then because I liked the non-captain types when I was a kid, of course. Tony Brooks said after the Tennessee loss, we were running the ball all over them, and then at the second half we stopped running. I guess the head coach saw something we didn't, which is just the end of the world if said today. With the internet, that would be all over everything. Which is just
and that's atypical. Skip Holtz was the one that was in his ear, especially when they went to South Carolina. Dad, we have to open up the offense. Now the reference you're making was not at that time. But if I could just finish up on this, he took fault for the 89 loss to Miami because he said, and the players I think have said this, that they were in the wrong frame of mind because he didn't want another fight with Miami like they had in '88, and he took responsibility for that. When I spoke with him in 2023, I said, "What did you do best?" And he said, "Quote: I think I prepared them for life," which Holtz's heroes and everybody that you talk to now validates that. I said, "Man, you were tough to work for." And he said, "Well, yeah, I was tough to work for 2 reasons. One, I was an officer in the Army, and 2, I coached for Woody Hayes." And he talked about how Bo Schembechler always used to complain about Woody Hayes, and then Bo Schembechler ended up becoming the same coach that Woody Hayes was in terms of volatility and et cetera. Last thing I'll say is he told me he wanted Barry Alvarez to succeed him as head coach.
So did I. We might get to that later in this topic.
Yeah. And you think about it, Barry Alvarez went on to have a really successful career by Wisconsin standards, but he won 3 Rose Bowls.
Yeah.
And they were physical.
Career by most standards, really.
Yeah, they were physical, and they would, pound it out. And he wanted Alvarez instead of Davie, but his relationship, I had a really good relationship with Mike Wadsworth, but he was a very tightly cut, close to the vest, distinguished man. And Holtz said that he couldn't get conversations with Wadsworth. When Wadsworth followed Dick Rosenthal, who Holtz got along with brilliantly, like his best friend. He had, in order to speak with Wadsworth, Holtz said he had to go to a intermediary in order to set up something with Mike Wadsworth, which, that seems crazy. I had a lot of respect for Mike Wadsworth. If that was true, though, it shouldn't have been that way. But again, Lou is a handful. I know he just passed, and we all say wonderful things about him, including me. I think he's the most brilliant, most influential man in my entire life. But he was tough. He was tough to deal with. So some of those interactions may not have been initiated outside of him. But I love the guy. When I say I love him, I mean that I respect him as much as anybody that I've ever known.
Drew, we are 1 week away from spring football, and I want to get both of your thoughts, a little preview going in, and I want to start off with anything except why we think Notre Dame needs a backup quarterback to find over the next 2 months, because we're going to be talking about that all off season if they don't pursue another. That has been, if there were 15 questions I have not used in today's podcast from Twitter and our board, it was about the backup quarterback, because we'll just figure it out in mid-April. How's that? We'll go, our next backup quarterback question is mid-April.
Yeah, so just kind of previewing spring ball and what we're most looking forward to seeing.
Yes, yeah, and it's I think it's all these incoming guys for me. I didn't want to get your thoughts on it because I think Priester and I talked about this a little bit ago. Is just so many new people coming to watch in the spring.
Yeah, I mean over 30 new guys at least. I mean, and there's definitely some interesting positions that obviously like defensive tackle, wide receiver, where they brought in some talented guys that I really want to see how they kind of evolve and interact because. I think what's exciting about this too is that the question marks, there's some really talented or highly rated guys there, which hasn't always been the case. I think I've mentioned that before. So getting to see how those guys gel, getting to see if, Mylan Graham, you're hearing good things, but does he actually do it on the field? Or is it just one of those things once he gets into the competitive situations with the coaches, you don't see it yourself? So kind of confirming some of the things you're seeing in that regard. And I'm also just curious to see CJ Carr's progression. We saw him, some of his ups and downs last year, but I mean, ESPN just rated him as the best returning quarterback in the country. Obviously, we saw a lot of those traits last year, but what are some of the ways we start seeing him improve? Does he look like that guy right away? And kind of how does that leadership shine?
Go ahead, Tim.
I'd be really disappointed if CJ Carr didn't pick up where he left off, and I think you guys feel the same way, and you probably feel he is going to pick up where he left off. I agree with, with so many new faces, a Mylan Graham. I mean, there's a reason why he's at Notre Dame and not at Ohio State after they just lost a first-round draft pick at receiver. It's so many moving parts, which makes this, I mean, in a groundbreaking spring practice for all of us because this many new faces is really out of character, but that's the nature of college football now.
Well, I think it's interesting you bring up Mylan Graham. I look at it this way going in the spring. There's 3 Tobias Merriweather types joining the squad that are all highly rated than Tobias Merriweather was coming in. We all had high hopes for Tobias Merriweather as a freshman. You have to take yourself back to not what you found out about Tobias Merriweather, but what he was coming into his first spring. We all had high hopes for him. I mean, you are looking at Finley, Porter, and Graham. You have 3 guys, 2 of them older than Merriweather. 2 of them, one of them, they both have played football before. You needed Merriweather to hit, Drew, like you said, in 2022. He absolutely 100% had to be a good player in 2022 and 23, and he wasn't. The chances of all 3 of these guys not hitting this year and next year are exceptionally slim. I think the wide receiver room change is the biggest room. The biggest difference you could think of in 3 years is the wide receiver room. I suppose the defensive backs room, if you go back 4 years, is an astronomical biggest change in the history of the program. But in terms of just like how the receiver room has evolved, it would be hard for me to believe CJ Carr doesn't find weapons. And there's probably going to be somebody different than you write about practice number 3, Tim. You're probably going to write about somebody looking good in practice number 3, and by 12, 15, and summer number 10, it's going to be the totally different guy.
Well, there's no doubt. That just goes back to the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
Your expectations change positively and negatively on guys. And good. I mean, I think that's you kind of want a little bit of that. I would be surprised if a transfer doesn't come out as a dog. RJ Oben was not very good.
Oh, in the spring. You mean, yeah, in the
Right,
spring. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we all
JJB,
have
we didn't
our
know him in the spring. JJB at the end of the spring. We were like, I don't know what this guy's going to do. He's
right,
a top five
exactly,
player.
and we all have in our minds, not necessarily favorites like fans do, but I mean ones that we think, okay, these two guys have a better chance of hitting than this guy, and it won't be that way. But so many 27 freshmen. I think it's 27 freshmen that are here. I mean, you're not going to be. Well, and it's why we always say, I can watch all the film in the world, but until you actually see a guy in person, you don't really know what he is. And so 27 for me, I'm not part of 24/7 group that goes to the various camps. They have an advantage there. I've just looked at film. We've all just looked at film, and there's 27 guys out there that 10 of them, however many will be different than we anticipated.
Well, that's a good point. I think we do those like newcomer practice reports usually on the first day. We might have to do multiple of those. Like that might actually
Might
be
be
just
only
thinking of
newcomer
yeah.
versus. I mean,
It
that's
might change our editorial plan a little bit just because like there's a lot of guys we're going to need to get eyes on and they're going to be all over the field too.
you watch CJ Carr and somebody else has to watch 17 new freshmen on defense and 17 new freshmen on offense. I'll take CJ Carr. You guys watch all the other ones.
Well, I think I think it's more important that we. Well, that's not true. The defensive tackles,
Yeah, that's what I was about to
the
go to.
transfers.
The defensive tackles is the other fun aspect of going into spring. I can't wait to watch the new tackles play.
And there are more question marks on offense and defense. Like there aren't, other than the tackles, like even Keon Keeley's not coming in as a projected starter per se.
Yeah, in fact, I think you've kind of started to side with me on this one. We said during the portal, I felt the new guys were better than last year's guys at this point. Last year's guys played well at tackle. Like those five played well. They outperformed expectations. But I feel like going in, Brew, Gray, Onye, since Onye's there, hugely important that he's there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Hughes, I mean, I really like, who am I forgetting, by the way? Defensive tackle is an obvious one. But there's
Mookum?
a five pack. I'm sorry, Drew.
Did you Mookum? Is that who you're thinking of?
No, there's another, but I'll look it up right now.
Well, Burgess, I think we're
pack. Oh, yeah,
expecting
I think
Burgess to do.
Burgess.
Yeah.
I think Chris Burgess is going to have. I think I like that five more going in than I did last year's five, even including Rubio and losing Heinisch.
No, I agree with you.
So I think that's and Keon Keeley the edge. I know people. We had a question actually. I didn't want to include it until we see him play a little. Is defensive end one of the weaknesses? And I don't feel like defensive end is a weakness when Boubacar Traore is a top 3 player on the roster. Bryce Young is still a top 20, even if he doesn't improve. Like, I think Bryce Young's going to improve a lot, but even if he doesn't, he's still a solid player. And Keon Keeley is an up-and-coming player. He will be good for Notre Dame. The Keon Keeley I saw against Oklahoma in a playoff game, if they can harness that, that was a guy that was hard to block in a playoff game at home.
It's beyond those three where the question marks are.
Yes.
You can't afford attrition. You need attrition or not. You need Rodney Dunham to hit, like out of the gate.
That's true. It was actually unfortunate. Drew and I were at Tim, you were there too. We were at the interviews, and a whole handful of guys didn't come out. It was not because they just didn't come out. It was I think the workout went long. There was something. I'm sure some people had classes. Some of them had like protocol trainings for things you do as a football player at Notre Dame, and it was poorly timed. But it was all of the defensive linemen had to do it that day. So we have not talked to a freshman defensive lineman yet.
Yeah, but I think that's what makes the spring so intriguing. Like there are some question marks there, but you're talking about Keeley, a former top 10 player, Dunham, a top 10. Like you're talking about guys that like, oh, this makes sense if they do hit and start putting it together and they have all the tools. I feel like in years past, it's like, well, maybe this guy who's been here for 5 years and he works hard, maybe he can kind of put it together and not be a net negative or something. There's these tools there that are really intriguing, and it's like, well, I could see why this would work out still.
We have several football questions in segment 2, Bring Up the Boards, and we'll be right back. Tim Priester, Drew Medtalk. Segment 2 is actually chock full because I'm adding that one Statman question. Statman72, a regular contributor. You're going into segment 2 as well. We'll be right back. Bring Up the Boards. Welcome back to segment 2, Bring Up the Boards. Our first question from PA Irish 5 and a little addition, courtesy Statman72. We've heard a lot about how Notre Dame is all in on winning a national championship in football. How much of that is due to A, Freeman, B, Pete Bavacqua, C, the university's acceptance of the program at large, and D, courtesy Statman's edition, Brian Kelly originally stating that LSU offered a better chance to win a national championship for him.
Drew.
I mean, I think the answer is all of the above to a degree. But I mean, I think Marcus Freeman is the main reason they feel like they go for it. Like the roster is in a position where you do go for it. Like even before they made a lot of the transfer portal additions, they had, I mean, other than defensive tackle, they had, the best personnel, some of the best personnel in the country coming back on defense. You have the best returning quarterback they've had probably in 20 years, especially when you couple his leadership abilities and his overall talent. Like you've had guys like Clausen or Kaiser who could be a second round pick, but they weren't the leaders or the galvanizers, the reliable people like that who could also go out and do all those different things. So I think when you have maybe the best returning defense in the country, and ESPN even just named Carr as the best returning quarterback in the country, you go for it because those two elements can do a lot of things, and you can at least surround him with talented players and shore up some weaknesses. And I think that's ultimately why you really go for it, because you don't even know who's going to be the starting quarterback next year.
To a large degree, it's all of the above, but it's mainly Marcus Freeman. I mean, let's be real here. We wouldn't be in this sitting here talking about these kind of things. Notre Dame, the odds-on favorite to be the national champs and All-Americans and all that. And Marcus Freeman has helped orchestrate that. But I agree with you exactly, Drew. It's the talent that he's gathered on the field, a quarterback that when you talk about Notre Dame quarterbacks, you say generational. Tremendous generational quarterbacks don't come along at Notre Dame very often, and Carr has a chance to be one of those. And then it's the experience on defense, and then what they did in the transfer portal to really, really significantly patch the concerns that you had at defensive tackle. You're not considered the odds-on favorite to win the national title if there aren't multiple things that contribute to that feeling. And so it starts with Marcus Freeman, but and he's gathered a lot of the great things around him. But it is a lot of it. It's Bavacco with NIL. It's the Notre Dame administration, admissions being more accepting about grad transfers or regular transfers.
Regular transfers. Yeah.
I got to get that phrase out of my head because I'm accustomed to just saying grad transfers. But it's a lot of things that starts with Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, I think Freeman brought it in the 2024 run. Not the whole season, but the 2024 run in the playoffs. The university, as Pete has said on this podcast, started to really enjoy the fruits of winning again. What it felt like to win again. They've forgotten what it felt like to win in big games, because they would get there and get hammered. They got to 3 huge games. They got hammered in 3 of them. That's not fun. It isn't fun to get there and get destroyed.
Well, it diminishes your accomplishments up to that point. It
totally does. It diminishes it. The way they lost diminishes the accomplishments. The way they lost in 24 does not. Bavak was saying, I am maniacal about winning a national championship in college football is part of this. I mean, if he didn't say that, people would not be throwing him in A, B, C, and D. I don't think. I will say for Brian Kelly, that was huge before he was fired. Like through 2024, that was a big part of it for Notre Dame and for Pete Bavacqua and Notre Dame fans wanting to win it. I think it's over now that he's not coaching. I don't think anybody cares about Bryant beating LSU or Bryant. I mean, he's not even involved anymore. But man, 2022 and 2023, if Kelly would have won a title, would have been devastating for Notre Dame fans. By the time 2024 rolled around, Notre Dame's playing for a title. Nobody cared about Brian Kelly anymore. Or you shouldn't care about Brian Kelly anymore after they made that run. But those first 2 years, remember when he went out and beat Alabama? Like Notre Dame's biggest win was beating Clemson. He beat Alabama the same night. That was a big deal for people that hate Brian Kelly. And now that he's out of it, I don't think people care about Brian Kelly saying that. I think they'll just be happy if Notre Dame wins it.
Well, I agree. It takes away the validity of him saying that, because at the point you were like, well, the last 3 coaches at LSU have done this. Notre Dame's been so far away. And then after, as you referenced, 2024, now it's easy to be like, Brian Kelly was wrong. Whereas until recently, you couldn't say
right.
that.
No, he was right. Yeah, Phil, you're right. The last 3 coaches at LSU won a title. He wasn't wrong that it was easier. It was, he didn't do it, but he didn't do it.
I remain appreciative of the fact that Notre Dame rallied against Ohio State, because that could have left
Yeah. Oh no, it was a
really bad mark on it, and they competed. One more play, man.
It was one
more play.
One more play to have a chance to go down.
Exactly.
That's what it was. Yeah. That's and that's about what the point spread would have told you. One more chance to have a chance to go down and do it. Next question is DFW Irish 14. It has been said by the panel here ad nauseum that Micah Shrewsberry will get a 4th year. My question, and this is actually from CMU Pens fans, so you will use it in your podcast, is in your opinion, should he get a fourth year? If so, why? Is it his basketball coaching acumen? Is it his ability to make the university proud with his behavior? I think this could be some sarcasm involved here. His teams are consistent, or is it his team's consistent improvement each year leading to a peak in year number 4? There's a lot of sarcasm in there, but it's a great question. We all think Micah Shrewsberry will be back. Had a very low moment over the weekend, Tim, where Boston College predictably beat Notre Dame. That was not surprising if you watch Notre Dame and Boston College over the years. Why should he be back? Because we still all agree he will be back. I believe we all agree he will be back.
Well, first of all, his behavior in the press conference after the last home game, to be ripping on fans that aren't there at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday in early March to come see your lousy basketball team that you have
team. Yeah.
that you have created. I know there's a thread on the Irish Illustrated Four Horsemen Lounge message board about, okay, did that seal his fate? I have to admit that crossed my mind because that was completely inappropriate. Your team's not ready to play. Good God Almighty. It's your fault. That's your fault. You are the head coach if your team's not ready to play. I know the injuries, I get all that, but at some point you can't just you just can't say it in passing. You have to mean it that it's your fault. But when somebody says should he get a fourth year, are you asking
He's
the
getting
media
a fourth year, so we want an answer why he should get a fourth year.
Well,
So
but should he get a fourth year based upon the media and the fans? We don't pay his bill. We're not responsible for the final 4 years of his contract. So how do I answer should he get a fourth year based upon the product and his behavior and his at times horrible representation of Notre Dame, which I think might be the most damning of all. No, he shouldn't get a fourth year. But you also have to understand this immediately tears down any kind of foundation or stability within the program. There doesn't look like there's much of that. I get that. But, a Louisville will spend to completely rebuild their program, and they can turn around. Notre Dame's not going to spend like that. So, I mean, if Shrewsberry's fired, Burton's gone.
there's a reason. That's what we're looking for. A
Okay.
reason for him to get
If
a fourth year.
Shrewsberry's fired, Serta's gone.
Yeah.
If Shrewsberry's fired, both the Shrewsbury players are gone. So you have to remove.
Brady,
I
don't worry about
understand.
that.
I understand. But
I think Brady's a fine player as going into a senior, a fine backup player going to a senior year. But you don't. Burton, Serta, and Harrelson might not make his decision.
Harrelson, we don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Brady
we
Kohler
don't
went
know.
to his high school too. Like, not that he's on that level, but he's another guy I really like too
well.
that might not come back. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree. I think I don't have the same level of expectations for Notre Dame's men basketball. So I think like giving him another year, he did have his preseason first team All ACC player go down for most of the year. Didn't play a conference game, I don't believe. So, I mean, if you're looking for reasons, you give him the benefit of the doubt and let him finish out his contract and see what it brings potentially. I mean, I always like that he really recruits pretty well. He recruits the state of Indiana well, which I think was always like a big deficiency under Mike Bray. So, I mean, I think if this were, I don't know, Kansas basketball, yeah, he's not somebody you bring back, but I don't think that's where Notre Dame is with this men's team. And I think that's probably the best argument. Plus, who are you going to bring in? I think sometimes, like, if you're Pete Blackwood, do you have a list and have a guy you're pretty confident you can go get that would be a better option? Or are you going to fire him and figure it out and don't really know if it's going to get better? I think that's where my mind always goes to at the end of the day.
I go towards I don't know. I'd like to see a chance of if Harrelson comes back and you have Harrison, Burton, Serta, Kohler, and a quality big man. And Micah, I went to his media interview. He kind of hinted that they need a big man in the portal. He didn't say the word portal, but he said, you have to have somebody that can have a big athletic body inside so we can defend the likes of Stanford And I mean, that's what happened in the Stanford game. They were laying the ball up over Carson Tout like he was their little brother. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I like Carson Tout. Carson Tout could not stand up and put his hands high enough to stop Stanford's players inside. That's a problem. That's a problem if that's your guy inside. He has to be your second guy inside. So the money's the reason he's coming back, I would say. The second reason is you'll lose Burton and Serta. You will lose them if you, and that doesn't mean you should bring them back. I'm not saying that might mean they go 15-5 and the 68th team in, by the way, if they bring back Burton and Serta. You remember when they were 15-5 in the ACC, they were the 68th team to get in the NCAA tournament under Mike Bray. They were the last team in. Do you know how many weeks they were ranked that year? 0. You know the last time they were ranked? December 2017.
Oh my God.
You know the last time Notre Dame was ranked for an entire basketball season? This is Monday Musings. When's the last time Notre Dame basketball was ranked for an entire season?
2015?
1986.
Oh.
So no, I don't think they're going to get a great guy to come in and save the program right away. I think that they are stuck with a bad hire that has to dig himself out of it and dig himself out of it with his players and a transfer portal. Like this is a bad situation. I'm not saying those 15 and 16 teams weren't great, but think about that.
The lack of leadership is astonishing.
But Bray's last 4 years, they were never ranked. Other than December 6th, that's insane to think about that. An entire class of player went through without being ranked at Notre Dame. And it was the top class then at the time, the Leshevsky, Goodwin, Hub class.
Yeah, we do spend way too much time talking about.
Now we're done with it, but that's why it's not as easy as people think. We like Indy basketball, but that's a long time, guys. 1986.
Just to add one more thing too, is I think they also got bad at a time when then the sport transitioned so much with NIL, and then it probably made it a lot harder to pivot at the time where they needed to be in a position to do so.
Yeah, and Mike knew this was time to get out when the NIL was coming.
Our next question is actually from CMU Pens fan. In honor of Lou Holtz, how the hell did the admin, in retrospect, think, yeah, let's go with Bob Davie to replace him?
Tim, you want to start with a little piggyback of what you said about Barry Alvarez? I don't think you included it in part one, that Lou Holtz wanted Barry Alvarez. Yeah,
Lou Holtz wanted Barry Alvarez, and in subsequent conversations with Barry Alvarez, he would have been very, very interested in that. Now, he had already established himself, at Wisconsin.
As well, he should to be Notre Dame's football coach.
Barry Alvarez won he was 3-0 in Rose Bowls at Wisconsin, and that is when you talk about bowl championships, the most precious of all of them through the years has always been the Rose Bowl, and to be 3-0. But you think about Barry Alvarez, defensive-minded coach, would have had the full approval of certainly the defensive side of the ball, and I'm sure the offensive side of the football, as well. Well, no, the defense wouldn't have known him, but Barry Alvarez he did a great job at Wisconsin. Not a good job, a great job. Now, he didn't string together a bunch of 10-win seasons, but he did a great job there. And Alvarez would have been interested, but at that point, Notre Dame, nobody was listening to what Lou Holtz had to say at Notre Dame, which is a pretty sad state of affairs. And I want to jump back to segment one in that, the way the 94, 95, 96 seasons transpired, you did feel like the program needed a breath of fresh air. There's no doubt about that. But more than anything, they just needed Holtz and his people to recruit a little bit better and put a more formidable team on the football field.
But I think that's a good point, though. They needed a breath of fresh air, and they went with a defensive coordinator that was not winning as much with Lou Holtz. It was a shocking moment to all of us at Notre Dame, graduating from Notre Dame the year before, that they were hiring Bob Davie. It was absolutely
I saw it a little bit differently because I knew Davie really, really well, and he was the up and comer, assistant coach / coordinator that was going to get a head coaching job. The one at Notre Dame, that's pretty big, especially after just being there a couple of years. But I think within the industry there was a thinking that he's going to get a head coaching job. But the way it's always been, Marcus Freeman is the vast exception to the rule. You had to go. You have to go. That was the whole idea of Urban Meyer. Go coach somewhere else, and
Mhm.
maybe you could. Although nobody thought of Urban Meyer in terms of what he is today, but you had to at Notre Dame. You had to go somewhere else and learn how to be a head coach, and then you might be ready for Notre Dame. I have a question from Violent Flems. Back in December, the podcast crew was not as high on Notre Dame's roster as other sites, fans, etc. I say this because you cited the 2025 team as one with better top-end talent, attributing that to you, Tim, and the 2024 team overall talent, and that was something that Pete Sampson pointed out, and neither myself nor JB disagreed. A, have you changed your mind? Why or why not? And B, why were you all so wrong?
I like the B part. That was good. I mean, the love price thing is different for me. I don't. That's top end talent is why they were so great last year. Is Love and Price. They were better than their offensive line. Notre Dame's running backs are better than their offensive line was. Drew's stats coming out of the combine that Jeremiah Love's averages after contact. He was astronomically great. I think Notre Dame is the deepest roster I've seen since the '93 Holtz era. I just feel like those top two guys really, really mattered. I thought they were absolutely phenomenal players, and it really mattered.
I do think with Love too, to your point, like he is, I mean, he's considered like the next Saquon Barkley now. Like he is, people think at running back he could go in the top three after just how spectacular he was, and he could make. I mean, CJ Carr wasn't having his best game. The offensive line was struggling. You had the rare running back in college football who could make something happen for you at any point. So I definitely get all that. I think maybe just if you look at CJ Carr, Leonard Moore, I think I could still lean towards 2026 being the most talented and deepest team overall, but it's hard unless CJ Carr becomes like the top overall pick. We know what Jeremiah Love came this past year. CJ Carr still has work to get to that point where he could be one of those top overall prospects next year and really carry them the way we saw Love did this year.
We're not smart enough, I guess, as the other sites that can determine in December how good the team in the following September is going to be. I mean, I'm just not inclined to just immediately without it. It's something that you have to study for a while. First of all, you don't know who you're getting in the transfer portal in December, so
I think that's why he wondered if we were changing our minds on the.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, like, I just in December, it's very difficult for me with all the moving parts over the course of almost 5 decades of doing this to just make a declaration of how good a team is going to be 9 months later. The transfer portal had a lot to do with it, as did the loss of Malachi Fields, Love, Price, Raritan, Paulding, Wagner. Craig was hurt at the time, Battelle, Tui, Alamaka, Onye we didn't think was coming back. Dawson, Rubio, KVA was hurt at that time. Devontae Smith. I think at that time we kind of suspected that Schuler might enter the draft. My answer is yes, I've changed my mind, and my statement is I'm not smart enough to be able to know exactly how good a team is going to be in December while the season is still going on. I guess it was
one more ode to Jeremiah Love, and I'll put it away after that. When Love faced a box with 6 or fewer defenders, that's 70 rushing attempts, he averaged 9 yards a carry. That's the most yards in the country. When Love was contacted behind the line of scrimmage, he averaged 10 yards per carry. That's the most of any running back with 100 rushes in the last 10 seasons. If you think someone's better than Jeremiah Love coming this running game behind the exact same offensive line, I think you guys are smoking crack. So I'm going with last year's team. Notre Dame has an easier schedule this year. There's no A&M or Miami, so Notre Dame can go undefeated much more easily than they could have last year. Our next question. This is a football question. It sounds like basketball. We'll stay away from basketball, everybody. Arrowfan624. Amidst the basketball program struggling and the talk of the lack of support for that program, there's been some commentary that any money spent to try to improve basketball takes away from football. Doesn't that fallaciously assume football doesn't get what it wants first? I concur. Couldn't it be pretty good case be made that from just a pure financial perspective, football has underperformed 2 of the last 3 seasons, giving the resources committed? I think that's a very interesting question.
I think for number 2, Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Drew.
They
I
didn't
think for
underperform in
Notre
2024 is the accepted point here, obviously.
Two, I don't think that. I mean, I think the way the season started could maybe color it a little negatively. I think it was unfortunate scheduling the more you really look back on it. But I think they've had arguably one of the 2 to 4 best teams in the country the last few years. They're not spending more than every other team in the country when it comes to football. Texas Tech is spending a lot more on their roster. You've seen all these other things that other schools do. And I think it kind of begs the question going to the first part is like, how much is Notre Dame willing to kind of circumvent revenue sharing and things like that the way we see other schools are to spread out more of that capital and have more available to them? I don't necessarily know the answer off the top of my head, but I think to answer that adequately, you also need to know, are they doing other things to still pay players more money, or are they adhering to the rules more than some of these other schools are?
I think that from a pure financial perspective, football has underperformed the past 2 of 3 years, giving the resources committed. I mean, like to put yourself in a position to be a national championship contender every year, it rarely goes from not being one to being one. And I just think that they were kind of bridging a gap during that time, especially when you consider, how much money Notre Dame is willing to commit at a time when multiple front runners in college were willing to commit a ton more to it. And then you throw a Texas Tech into the equation that was, willing to spend an incredible amount as well. I have a difficult time really grasping the concept of the question, because I don't think the underperforming, I don't really know how to answer that question. Tim, help me out, because
Well, no, I think
Aerofan 624 has kind of stumped me as to where he's coming from on this.
I think that if you were to flip it around, and I've said this a lot about the basketball program, what do you get by putting more money into the basketball program? I don't know what you get. I know what you get by putting more money in the football program, and it's a university that has 100% re-embraced football program with an absolute rabid desire to win a national title. I think if you put more money in the basketball program, they could go 15-5 in a crappy conference and finish in the top 64 of the country. I don't know if that's good business. I know it's good business in football. So I disagree with the premise of the question. I think it's a great question. I think it's bad business to put a lot of money in the Notre Dame men's basketball program because, as I pointed out, 1986, 1987 is the last year they were ranked for an entire football season. And no one even thinks about that being a humanly possible thing. Like, it's been 10 years, it's been 8 years since Notre Dame competed in a basketball season. And they had a really good run 3 years before that.
So what do you do? Just let it wither and die?
I don't go over the top spending money on
Okay.
trying to help the basketball program as much as other people would. I don't think it's an expense of the football program.
Look, you have
I don't
to,
think it's an expense of the football
you
program.
have to, it all starts with finding a great coach. Indiana's
Yes,
the national champions in football. I don't give a damn what anybody says. That begins and ends with the head coach. You don't. I don't want to hear about they were an older team, so that's the blueprint. Okay, let's see how many teams that follow that blueprint go undefeated and win the national title in football. I mean, come on. It begins with you have to find a great coach. They didn't do that this cycle.
Yeah, I think to the point we said earlier, like Marcus Truman became even more worth investing in at a certain point, and they do need a coach that proves they're worth that further investment in basketball. And I think based on some of the questions we've had today, I don't think many people would say that right now. So our next question is from Maltese Irish, albeit much of it is yet unproven on the field. Does a wide receiver room so full of seemingly capable bodies and potential production run the risk of being so ripe for discontent with only so many snaps and balls to go around?
Tim, thoughts?
Well, it comes down to coaching. I mean, coaching prevents that from happening. And again, it starts at the top with Marcus Freeman, team glory. He promotes that over individual glory, and it appears that most of them buy into that. I mean, what are you going to do? This is a dilemma that every team faces in trying to gather talent and trying to get depth and trying to get excess talent. Could there be discontentment? Ultimately, at the end of every year, we talk about, okay, who needs to go because they're just not productive enough to remain on a very volatile, competitive roster. But in order to avoid these things, it has to start with the head coach, and Notre Dame has one of the best head coaches in the country to prevent things like this from happening. But with all the money that's involved in the game now, there's always going to be discontent. If you're not playing because you're denying me the ability to make more money by not playing me.
15 scholarship receivers is a lot. A lot better than having 5 that could play like they did in 2022 or 2023. But 15 scholarship receivers is a lot. So there'll be discontent in the room. I mean, there was last year at the top. But I think that's the sign of a healthy program. I think you have discontent in the room and you move on with life because the good players play. Now, if 12 guys are having discontent because the 3 that play stink, then that's not good. But I don't think that's going to be the case at Notre Dame. I think I love that it's Tony Alford's line. I use it all the time. It's not happy camp. Maybe they want you to be uncomfortable. You're supposed to be uncomfortable as an athlete at a high level of sports. It's good to be uncomfortable. Some guys aren't going to make it, and you will not be on the team next year. And people just don't get too attached. Just like Game of Thrones. Don't get so attached to the players. It'll be fine.
To both your points, I think Marcus Freeman says that he wants players to be unsatisfied with how much they're playing if they're not playing as much as they want, and they're always discontent last year. I mean, I don't think Aeneas Williams was shy about that at times, and he still came back, and he's still now our pick to be probably the most likely to be their top running back. So that doesn't mean Notre Dame doesn't have the culture to like withstand and handle those type of things. But if guys aren't satisfied with the fact that they're not playing when they're a former top 100 player, then that's probably a worse sign.
All right, we're skipping number 7, the original number 7, correct? Tim?
Yep.
So I'm going to Jim Booney _ CRS.
You're going to wake him up.
I'm going. Okay, 2 questions. Thank you. Wake him up 408. I believe Aeneas Williams falls somewhere between Tony Jones Jr. and Kyron Williams, both of who are in the NFL, mind you. Which do you think Aeneas Williams will be closer to? And then second.
He's given them. He's averaging out the 2 of them together there.
1,160 yards total yards from scrimmage and 12 total touchdowns. For reference, those are the averages of the 2. Let's start with that.
I think that's a viable. Well, I think yards from scrimmage. I think that's viable for a healthy Aeneas Williams because that's right. It includes receiving. He's a good receiver. I think he'll be short of 12 TDs just because it's hard to get there and CJ Carl throw out touchdowns. Now, if he catches 5 touchdown passes, he'll get to 12 TDs too, right? I mean, if he's that involved in the passing game that he's getting the screens that Jeremiah Love caught 3 and 4, so Aeneas won't get 5. I mean, I think just short of that. But boy, Aeneas Williams, he has 10 touchdowns total and 1,100 yards from scrimmage. Notre Dame's offense is looking good.
Yeah, I agree. I think that numbers aren't out of the question, and I think. I mean, I'd say he's probably going to go closer to Tony Jones Jr. because, I mean, I think he was a guy who we saw would be an undrafted free agent in the NFL. Not saying that Aeneas Williams couldn't be better than that, but Kyron Williams is still also a 5th-round pick. But this is still going to be his first year as like a full-time starter. Kyron at least had 2 years under his belt before his final season. So, but I agree. I think they're going to get him involved in the offense in a lot of different ways. We know he can pass block well, which is going to keep him on the field. For other situations too. So I think there's a lot of different things they can do with him that he can find ways to be successful.
I'll provide my answer after I ask the second part of the question. That's from Jim Booney CRS. Who do you think will be running back 2 at the beginning of the season? Will it be Kedron Young? Will it be Nolan James? Somebody other? And then also what about mid-season? Who will be the number 2 running back?
Great question, because mid-season will probably bring about a change this year. I just think they won't be totally settled on their number 2 back out of the 4, the 2 freshmen, James and Young. For reference, by the way, Tony Jones had 1,000 yards from scrimmage in 13 games in his last season. It did not seem like it, but he had 1,000 yards from scrimmage, so I think Aeneas Williams will get more than Tony Jones did as a senior. He had 7 touchdowns. My choice for, all right, I don't know who will be at the beginning of the season. My choice for middle of the season is Javian Osborne. Number 2. I have no idea at the beginning of the season. I don't know how we'll handle that. The beauty of it is they're not opening at A&M or at Miami, so they could actually probably go with, you could go with the freshman if he's 2B to Kedron Young or Nolan James is 2A. You could go with the freshman because you're not entering a world of hurt in terms of freshman's first game.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how the freshmen show in a couple of weeks. Or do they look like they belong out there right away? Because then I could see maybe one of them getting that second running back job in fall camp. But that's a lot to say before I've seen them run behind a college offensive line or anything. And Keedron Young is still coming back. So honestly, if I had to go at the start of the season just to pick somebody, I might go Nolan James, but I wouldn't. I would still probably take the field over him as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. First of all, let me say that I think Aeneas Williams' skill set is a little bit greater than Tony Jones Jr., and I like Tony Jones Jr. coming out of IMG, coming out of high school. But Kyron Williams, it's not so much the skill set; it's the mindset with Kyron Williams, just unstoppable. And that was something that we really, I think, as a staff and probably as an entire media corps, didn't quite realize until we started seeing Kyron Williams perform in games. But numbers wise, I don't know. I think Aeneas Williams has a little bit greater skill set than Tony Jones, and so I think that he can perform, can achieve some things, specific plays and games and situations a little bit more than Tony Jones. As far as the number two running back, I just kind of suspect that the way they've talked about Nolan James, that he'll come out as the number two, which will make things difficult with Keedron Young, I think, if that happens. And then as far as midseason, I like your pick of Javion Osborne, Tim. But I really don't know, because you just don't know where Keedron Young is at that point, what Nolan James has established. I know this is all about throwing out an opinion, which I'm reluctant to do in March as well as December, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it will be one of the more fascinating positions on the field this spring, certainly.
I like one thing we just got to remember: Kyron Williams earned that backup role as a freshman, came out in Louisville, dropped the ball, never want to be out there again. And he is the toughest minded individual you're going to see at running back. His season ended on the field at Louisville. He froze. He played two more games on special teams. They redshirted him. That's Kyron Williams. It's hard if you're a freshman to be in there and thrown into that role. Can you imagine Kyron Williams wanting to redshirt just after dropping a pass in an opener? I mean, that's
No, I can't.
no, you can't even think about it. And that's just with some people. It's not as easy as we all say it is for them to get the freshman to play. It's usually a different kind of guy that plays. Final question from Tally Alley. When you guys have seen a player make a huge leap, and I don't just mean physically, in between seasons, what criteria do you use for dubbing someone as someone to watch for a breakout year? And that's what spring ball is all about, guys. Is it consistency in the practices you watch? Is there a right number of practices you have to watch in a row? Why do you kind of dub someone, we'll start with you, Tim Priester, a breakout candidate coming into the next year?
I mean, even in the spring, we don't see 5 practices in a row. We don't ever see enough to know that. I think a lot of it is feedback. For me, I try to rely on experience of having seen some of these competitions through the year. You end up interviewing these players. Whether we admit to it or not, those interviews have an impact on you to some degree because, well, for example, Jadarian Price. I wasn't blown away by his early high school film. Liked his senior film a lot more. Wasn't sure what we were looking at or talking about in the spring. He was incredibly impressive in his interviews with us. And then Dylan McCullough loved him. So you start piecing these things together. It's never one thing, as we always say, and every individual is different. So I don't think that there's a specific formula for us. And even if there is, a lot of times that formula is wrong. But you just try to weigh as many things as you can and try to make an educated guess with it. And, you talk to other people outside the program with hands inside the program. You put a little bit of weight on that when you hear that during May and June and what have you. How are summer workouts going? You hear some things. It's really a vast accumulation of, I would say knowledge, but some of it is just, impressions. It isn't, when you say knowledge, that means it's actually true. And sometimes you're not sure what is true.
Yeah, and I do think consistency is important because you can see somebody make a good player or know they have talent, but if they're then doing the complete wrong things at other points, like they're not going to play because you have to have that baseline of you're going to do the right things and know where you're going to be. So I do think that's significant. I agree. Like even how the coaches talk about them, I mean, you got to be careful because they're going to maybe you got to see, does this sound a little different than how they talk about every other freshman or every other up and coming player? Like, so it's almost a comparison with each different coach, and that helps the longer they've been there. Some are going to talk everybody up. Some are going to try and say as little about every young player as possible. And then if they do mention somebody, it stands out. So I think it's little things like that and just talking to people and kind of your intuition too.
I think it's coaches bringing up a guy's name over the course of a year, like not one interview, beginning of spring, end of spring, beginning of August, end of August. When the name keeps coming up, and you're not saying how is Logan Saldate, but someone keeps bringing his name up, that is his position coach or his coordinator. I think that matters a lot more than me saying, "Hey, how does Cam Williams look?" Good, we love Cam. All right, that doesn't mean anything.
No doubt.
Someone says we love him. So I think the way a coach talks about guys you don't ask about is big. I have learned, even though you can see plenty of things for the future in one-on-ones and 7-on-7, you really want to see that 11-on-11 in practice once in a while to see how it goes. Because, look, the receivers should get open in one-on-one. If they don't, something's wrong with them. 7-on-7 even caters a little bit to the offense still, I think. And then a person's attitude, when Benjamin Morrison lit up Logan Diggs just for the heck of it, because they had pads on, and Diggs was pissed, and Morrison probably shouldn't have done it. It was contact. It was contact, but it wasn't full. It was thudding. Freshman Benjamin Morrison playing with the ones just decided to pop Logan Diggs for the hell of it out of bounds. I was like, oh, this guy has something there. I like to see those things too. Every once in a while. It's a different to see that up close because we just don't see much of it.
Yeah, Drew, I'm happy that you mentioned the observations we do get in the spring, which is much greater than the fall, and absolutely. Yeah. Those stick with you. There's no doubt about that. But getting back to what you said, Tim, about interviews and the guys that coaches mention, it's also the ones that they never mention.
Oh, yes, that's a great point.
That tells you that tells you or you bring the name up, and Al Washington was kind of notorious for saying the most generic things about guys that weren't
working on his toolbox. Is Al's line about if someone's working on their toolbox, they're working on a lot of stuff that you're not going to see on Saturdays.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, also, I think for Elijah Burris at one point, Mike Denbrock's like, we just got to learn the playbook. It's like, well, I liked what I saw from him, but if that's what he's saying, then he's not ready to play.
Absolutely.
Like, clearly he has a talent that we're seeing, but he's got to know that before he's getting on the field consistently.
That's the best point of this whole thing, Tim, is what they don't bring somebody up at all. It's like, oh, that's a problem. You just listed 4 guys and he's not on there. He's on our mind because we saw him make one play while we were there for 8 minutes. You've been there for the last 8 practices, and they know a little bit more. You know, the sad thing is, Tim, you mentioned the spring is more impactful now. You see more. Under BK and in 2023 when Notre Dame opened against Navy in August, we saw a lot. We really used to see a lot in August, and I really think that helped. And I would go back to the question from last week, and I want to bring it up here when it said, what can Notre Dame do to help your job? The joke was like better parking, better food, better seat. Open practice time. And I don't care if it is just all in the first 5 practices of August where they're not throwing in a damn thing of install. Just being able to see open time, so maybe more in the spring.
Yeah.
And more, I understand. No coach should give us access to when they're game planning and stuff like that.
No, absolutely not. And none of us expect that. But again, feedback from coaches in those practices that are open to us, especially when it's a full practice. I talked about the massive advantage when I was covering Lou Holtz, because practices were open. I'm standing 30 feet from Joe Moore coaching offensive linemen. If you can't learn something then, I mean, you're pretty brain dead out there. So all these things add up, no doubt.
We'll have a different type of feedback on Thursday because the Irish Illustrated will be Irish Illustrated Recruiting Insider with Tom Loy and Eric Thomas. And we'll be back on Monday. Monday is on the precipice of spring ball. We'll get to talk to some people, see some stuff. And we see a whole practice at the end of next week. I think we do. But that's one of those practices where they're wearing pads, but they're not allowed to really do a whole lot against each other. But it'll be fun for us to watch an entire practice. Until then, for Drew Mentalk and Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for watching, listening, Irish Illustrated Insider. And for my landlocked friends in South Bend, Indiana, I'm going to walk. I'll see you guys next.